Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for tonight's webinar for adoptive parents. My name is Kim King, co-hosting with Libby Denniston tonight. We are adoptive family coordinators and adoption coordinators here at Lifetime Adoption, and we have some special guests on our panel this evening. Tonight's webinar is a Q&A session for adoptive parents to have their questions answered by other adoptive parents. So it's a parent-to-parent adoption Q&A. Before we dive into everything and I hand over the floor to Libby, I just want to cover a few details. If you are brand new to Lifetime, the very first thing to do is to complete the free application on our website at lifetimeadoption.com/apply. Now, the free application is online at lifetimeadoption.com. That is a wonderful way to get started, share a little about yourself with us, and allow us that information to help explore further with you and answer questions tailored to your adoption needs and circumstances. There's no obligation with the application, and you'll normally, I would say adoptive parents typically hear back from Lifetime within 1 to 5 business days of submitting their application. So go ahead and do that tonight if you have that opportunity and have not already done so. You can also call with questions, 1-800-923-6784. You can email your questions, ADOPT at lifetimeadoption.com. And if you already know Lifetime but haven't joined us on Facebook, definitely join us on Facebook, facebook.com/open.adoption. We have a great support network on there, great conversations and encouragement. So there are lots of ways to connect with us. We want to be sure you have all the information to help you plan your adoption, find the right path where the Lord is leading your family, and have the answers filled in so you can feel confident moving forward with your adoption. With that, Libby, I'll hand it over to you so you can introduce our lovely guests this evening.
Okay, thanks, Kim.
You're
I
welcome.
wanted to start with, and we can sort of do this while we're getting things rolling tonight, but I just thought how often I've heard, especially recently, I feel like more people have been saying how much they love the webinars, in particular hearing other adoptive parents share, because they don't have a personal community of their own that either adopted a child or even has any clue what adoption is like today. And so I thought it might be interesting. You can, I think this is a multiple choice thing, a poll that we have set up here to just tell us a little bit about how many of you actually know people personally who are touched by adoption. And this isn't, you know, oh, I know a celebrity I love who adopted a child, or you know, my grandma's best friend from 1930 adopted her daughter, but I never knew him. You know, like, think about your personal circle, because that, I think, is really the benefit of a webinar like tonight, is the advantage of being able to ask adoptive parent to future adoptive parent the questions on your mind. And each of our guests tonight, Toni and Laura, they have shared their stories with us before on previous Lifetime webinars. Some of you may recognize them, but they have a wealth of experience, but also because now they're on the other side of where you are today, and they've also been raising a child for, well, I think they're going on a couple of years now. They're in year 2, or they have the experience also of open adoption, or what does that look like after you welcome your baby home. So we really invite your questions tonight. This looks like, let's see here. Kim, can you see the poll on your screen? Yes, there it is.
Yes, I sure can.
It looks like we actually have an audience where they're fortunate enough they actually know a lot of other adoptive parents. So that's really great. About a little more than half.
Well, I see the questions. I don't see the response.
Okay, let me get the results up.
There we go.
Okay.
So interesting.
It really is.
Wow.
And so, and actually there's a few of you who've known a woman who placed a child too, and that's such a different perspective to have personally in your life. So I hope that you're learning from these people. I hope they're a positive source for you. But I also encourage you, if there's things maybe you felt like they're a little too close to home, but I've always wanted to ask another adoptive parent this, you know, bring those up tonight, and we'll cover as much ground as we can. So I'm going to hide this poll, and we'll bring up our photos so you can see who we're going to hear from tonight. Toni, let's start with you. I would just love for each of you to give a brief introduction about yourself, how you came to adoption, and what adoption looks like kind of in a nutshell for you today.
Okay. So I'm a principal at a high school in a large city. My husband's a teacher. We had two beautiful young girls. We had one at the time, I think she was about 18 in her senior year in high school, and the other one was about 4 years old getting ready to enter school. But we wanted a boy. And to be honest, as educators and African American educators, we see the impact of little African American boys without a full family. So we wanted to have our own son so we could make the difference in the life of a child. Knowing really nothing about adoption other than the fact that it was a way for us to guarantee we could get a son without me being pregnant again, we started doing research. I had never heard of open adoption, didn't even know it existed. So I was a little uncomfortable at first with fears of, is this like shared responsibility? Who is he going to call mom? I got a little insecure just at the thought of it. So doing our online research, we found Lifetime. Being the super sleuth that I am, I did all of this background research and, saw that they had recommendations on the Better Business Bureau, that founder Marty Caldwell was recognized by so many political figures. I said, this must be real. So we actually gave them a call. We were very nervous still, even after our homework, and we just felt good about the conversation we had with our first interviewer, as I guess they were interviewing us. And so just every step we took, we found ourselves closer and closer to Lifetime. Our journey is really colorful. We had one mismatch. We experienced a reclaim. We had a baby for a week, and I can talk so much more about that at a point where we were about to give up. And like I was sharing with the ladies earlier, it was Lifetime that helped me continue on because I felt like they cared more about our situation than I had the strength to go on. And so they put me in touch with other mothers who've experienced the same situation. We got right back up on the horse, and within, I think it was less than a month, we got a call, and within, I think, 2 weeks, our son was born. And the way that I describe the feeling we have with the birth mother is there's this commercial where the lady is running out of the retail store and she says, start the car, because she's gotten such a great deal. Our birth mother is to us like a member of our family now. I feel like I have another family member who loves my son like I do, and she understands every silly moment that when I send a picture of just a stupid thing he does and I can text it to her, she feels what I feel. And so that's where we are now, and just very happy about where we are with our adoption process and just loving everything about it.
Well, and I love that you have shared with us in particular, because we can be in on it, but I know how private Aiden's birth mother keeps her story, but that you had a couple photos that you wanted to share tonight, and one was actually from your previous webinar, and I kind of tried to make her a little less obvious, but I brought it up on the screen here because you mentioned something to me actually earlier today about I want others to see her smile, and I think that is so key. Lifetime actually was doing a totally different webinar earlier this week where we were helping people who are helping these pregnant women consider their choices. And one of the sort of myths or misunderstandings, I think, is that women who choose adoption are just, they regret it, or they're just so sad and heavy-hearted about it. And it's not, I don't say that to minimize at all what they experience or go through, because it's a very real process emotionally. But to see her smile, and then also as you've met recently, and we'll probably pop this up again, but I wanted to compare these, the smile in her face, and all we could show you is her smile just to protect her, but to me, this speaks volumes to the potential of open adoption, that you opened yourself up to being there for her and getting to a point where she feels like family. Those smiles say it all.
Yeah, and you know it's funny because she always tells us what a gift we are to her. When I think she was such a gift for us, and I remember so clearly the moment where we were in front of the judge. I guess as a mother already, I felt like, this was so heavy for her, what she was doing. I cried more than she did. She had to hold my hand and tell me, she said, I'll be okay. She said, this is a good thing. And so,
wow.
we see each other at least, I know our agreement says once or twice a year, but we see each other at least maybe every other month just because I'm in the area because my daughter goes to college in D.C. So every time we're in the area, we just call and say, hey, can you come hang out with us? And she's glad to come.
Mm. And that's so unique, and I think that may even contrast some. It's good to have both of you ladies on tonight because you do have such different stories and experiences, but your hearts, I think, are very similar for your child's stories. And so, Laura, let's hear a little bit from you about what brought you to adoption and what that looks like today, because I know that your story is very different from Toni's.
Right, yeah. We started out trying to conceive a baby on our own, and it just didn't work out after that was for about 5 years. And so we went through the infertility process, tried different means to get pregnant, and it just never seemed right. And so I actually, at the time, worked at a pregnancy center in our hometown, and just was open up to the need for adoption and how other families needed, how families needed babies. And I was one of those families that wanted a baby so bad but couldn't have one. And so I just saw the need for adoption. And my husband was not on board. Libby, you know this. He was not on board at first, and I just prayed and prayed that his heart would change, and it did. And so at that point, we started searching for adoption agencies, and I mean, it was just one letdown after another. Excuse me. And so once I came across, actually found Lifetime through a pregnancy wheel at a conference for work, which is crazy enough. And so the pregnancy wheel said Lifetime Adoption on the back. I took it back to one of our nurses at the pregnancy center I was working at, and she said, you ought to check them out. And so sure enough, I got on the website that night, showed my husband, we prayed about it, and felt that that was where we were supposed to be. And we were immediately accepted with Lifetime, scared to death, and started funds, and really financially it was a tough thing for us. We didn't have all of the money up front, and so we had to raise the funds. And it was just a crazy way that it happened. We mentioned to one family member, and they just said, oh, hey, we want to help with your adoption, and wrote us a $5,000 check the next day. And it was just every day we would have somebody come and say, hey, we want to help you. We want to help with your adoption. We can't adopt ourselves because we're too old, or we have too many children already, or whatever the reason was. And so, but we want to financially help you fund your adoption. And I mean, within, I don't know, it was like 4 or 5 months, we had everything ready. All our funds were raised, and we turned in our stuff with Lifetime, and within a month, we were placed with a baby. And where we are now is we have an open adoption with our birth mom. We talk through email. She is not in a nearby town, so it's very difficult to do visits. So right now we just communicate through email. So I send her pictures and videos, and she's excited every time that we send stuff. So.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And for most of you listening, you may find that you're thinking locally for your adoption, but that it can be across country and you can still have that openness like Laura described. Or it could work out like Toni. I love the examples because you could have a family member or a child that goes away to college in the same area where your younger child's birth mother lives, or you could have extended family in that area that you just happen to go to once a year, even for holidays. That it's always amazing in hindsight just to see how those possibilities have opened. And so if you have questions tonight even just about what open adoption looks like, or like both of them shared how they got to understand it better and get over those hurdles that maybe kept them a little nervous. So far we're getting a lot of comments about how cute these photos are, so that's great just to have that. But let's see here. There was a question earlier. Where did it go? And Kim, I know you're feverishly answering some of these in the back too. Let's talk
Here's
a little
a
bit
question.
about the hospital experience. Is that the question
Yes.
you were going towards there? Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you, Cheryl, for your question.
Toni, let's start with you. Since we actually had that photo up a moment ago, let me pull that back up. Can you talk a little, this question said, did the birth mother want you in the delivery room, in the birthing room?
Okay, so we had two experiences, right? And they were both different. The one where we had the reclaim, the mother absolutely did want us in the delivery room. And let me just say that it was just a bad situation. It was not the birth mother. It was just a really not so great situation that no one could have foreseen. But I was there with her. We went in together. We met up before she went in. And let me commend Lifetime first off, because I remember calling you all and telling you, we're getting ready to go. We had to drive several hours to get there. You all had called ahead. You would have thought that we were presidential. The people at the hospital knew who we were, had everything ready for us. I mean, we walked right in. And I was a little nervous about that because I know how things are, you know, on the labor and delivery. But from the moment we walked in the hospital and went to labor and delivery, they knew about us, our situation. Now with my son Aiden, same thing happened. I think we actually his mother up and took her to the hospital. No, we didn't. Actually, what happened was we met her there, and she had some friends there from college. And we thought we were going to go in with her. We thought it was going to be me and one of her friends, but she had to go by way of cesarean, and only one person could go in. And so I felt, since we had just met, that maybe one of her friends should go with her. And I could see how torn she was because she wanted, you know, not to exclude me, but I said, listen, you know, this is your time. You go ahead. You have your friend with you so that you're comfortable. And I tell you that I learned a lot of that from the webinars that I watched that shared that we should give them their time and their space and not smother them. If it was meant to be, or if it's meant to be, it will be. And so that's how our experience went.
Wow. Thank you for sharing those words of advice as well. I love that.
Mm-hmm. And Laura, what was that like? Maybe even since your adoption came together so quickly, originally was your plan for Ava's birth mother, did she want to include you in the birthing process, or did she just want to know you were on the way? What was the original plan, and then how did things actually work out?
Ava came within 4 days of us finding out about her. So it was a very quick thing. We had only spoken to our birth mother one time before we actually flew to be there for the birth. But we had discussed to actually be in the delivery room, but it didn't work out. Libby, you called me on a Sunday night at, I don't know, 8 o'clock, and we flew out the next morning at 6:30. And so we got there, and she was already born. She was probably, I guess, about 12 hours old by the time we actually got there, based on plane and, layovers and getting a rental car and getting to the hospital and figuring out where we were supposed to go. So ours was so different. It was completely different, actually. So we had only spoken to our birth mom one time before that, and so that's kind of how ours happened. It was just so quick.
And so, I mean, this photo here, you got to spend time with her there. Did you end up spending a lot of time with her birth mother or with her family when you were in the hospital once you were there?
We actually, when we got there, she was in the NICU for just a couple of hours, so they actually sent us there first, and then we came down and met our birth mom, and then walked with our birth mom to meet our daughter. And at that point, we spent a little bit of time with our birth mother, had her parents with her. Spent a little bit of time, but actually not a lot. We did not have like a hospitality room or anything like that for us to stay in, but our daughter was the only one actually in the nursery, so the nursing staff was great. They just allowed us to stay as much time as we wanted in the nursery, except for times that she had to have baths or shots or anything, any other things. But we stayed in the nursery. We met our birth mom's parents, but we didn't really get to spend a whole lot of time. We were really I really felt like our birth mom just wanted to be alone at that time. And I say alone with her parents. I don't really feel that she wanted us there involved because she was just so emotional. There were so many emotions going on at that time for both of us.
Absolutely. And so you just brought up your last minute flight. We had a great question here. So how did you prepare for an emergency flight?
Well, we didn't. No, we did. I had actually, just because once we started the process, I knew that it could be a long time, but I also knew that it could be quick. So I already had a few things packed, necessities, gender neutral, because we didn't specify what gender we wanted. And so I had a few things already kind of on hand, and then it was just a rat race to get everything done. We were completely blessed by people buying us plane tickets and providing our way to get out there. So we really, my suggestion is just always have a backpack just in case, because you just don't know how fast it might happen.
Mm-hmm. And Toni, I mean, you went through, you mentioned the 2 times that you actually traveled for a baby, and one was your successful adoption. What advice would you give as far as, because even when you're matched and you know, okay, there's a due date coming, those babies can still come anytime. So how would you answer that question about last minute travel?
So when you have at least an idea of what town you're going to or what hospital, what I strongly recommend is call the hospital and ask them what accommodations are available either at the hospital or around the hospital. The first time, no, it was the second time. The first time we stayed with family because it was maybe about an hour away. The second time, I can honestly say we had a place on site at the hospital. They had like a hospitality house with rooms for families that were from out of town for various reasons. So that was our intention. So they said just call us when you're en route and it can work out. So what I say is even if it's just 2 days, 3 days, as soon as you find out you're matched, begin to call. The one thing that I want to caution is in the midst of your excitement, before you pull off, make sure you have all your clothes, because we were so excited when we went to pick up Aiden. My husband thought I brought my clothes to the car, and we left my whole suitcase at the house. And so we got down there, and that night I said, well, where's my suitcase? And so we had to buy. I mean, it was a good thing because I had to get a whole new set of clothes, but, we just didn't need that experience.
You know what? You just told me that a couple months ago, and I completely forgot that was you. But we use that as an example sometimes, Toni. That's so funny. What a memory.
Yeah.
Hey, Libby, I just thought about one thing. I know for us, I was just thinking about packing and all. We didn't pack a lot for our child because we knew that whatever we took, we'd have to fly it. So we ended up just going to a Target. Everywhere, every town you're in probably has a Target, Walmart, wherever. So we were able to get all of those diapers and wipes and necessities once we got out there. So that might be something too that to consider. So
the other thing I'd like to add to that is, from our first experience, we decided to go down only with our clothes and a lot of gift cards. Because the first time we went with all of these baby things, and when we turned the baby back into the mom, we just gave her everything. Everything that we had brought with us, we gave her. And I felt as though that was only right. I couldn't see myself giving her a baby with no car seat, things like that. So this time we decided we're not going to get anything until we feel, that this is going to work out. And so that's how we did it. We just took things for ourselves. And when we got down there, like you said, there's a gift card, a Walmart, Target, everything in every area.
And I think that's such a personal decision. Actually, I would love if you each would even answer this other question that came in sort of related, because it can be such an emotional thing to know that there's that risk involved, that you're traveling. She could change her mind, and then do you want to travel back home with an empty car seat and your diaper bag, or are you willing to give those things? Every family handles it a little differently, but also along the same lines, we had a great question, wanted to know if each of you set up a nursery before you adopted, or if you waited until you had your child home to prepare an actual room for the baby.
I can answer that one on my behalf. We did set up a nursery before, and I'll tell you the reason why we did is because, and this probably happened daily, we would just go in the room and pray over that crib, or pray over, the rocking chair that I was going to rock her in, and just really know that that's where our focus was on. No matter how it worked out, we knew that God had it planned. No matter if it was adoption, if it was us conceiving a child, but we just knew that ahead of time we wanted to have that ready. And we did gender neutral. I didn't have anything pink, and while we were gone, I came home and my family had decorated the whole nursery for us, which was amazing. I didn't have to do it when I got home, but that was something that really helped us, just to know that we were praying for a baby for our family.
We did have a nursery, but it wasn't fully equipped with everything. We still had a crib from Taylor. We did change the color of the room. We painted it blue because we knew we were going to have a boy. But there were just some things that we were not going to take down with us and pack up, because especially after the first time, my husband had to kind of take everything and just put it out to the side so that, every time I walked in the room, it wouldn't upset me. But then, we just got back on a horse, and like you said, you just pray and speak things into existence, because I just believe that what God has for us, it is for us.
I love that tip. That's such a popular question that Kim and I will hear on our usual Q&As, and we can give all examples in the world, but I think it's so helpful to hear it from each of you, how you handled that. Some women will say, especially adopted moms, it's usually more of a personal thing, I think, for the adopted mom compared to dad. But it sounds like Gerald was also trying to protect you, which speaks again to the partnership that you really need with your spouse when you're moving forward in this process. Yeah. So here's another really great question that we hear a lot, and I think that it's especially helpful coming from you ladies. Did you get a gift for your child's birth mother, and what was that, or what do you recommend someone who wants to get a token of gratitude for their child's birth mom? What was that like for you?
So and I like to speak to both experiences because they were so different. The first one, we were so ready. I went to, I think it's called Things Remembered, and I got this beautiful picture tree holder, like, for frames. And it was beautiful, and it didn't even cost that much, just as a gift so she could see him growing as we sent pictures. The interesting thing is with Aiden's mom, I didn't, again, want to get a gift or anything or go too prepared. And as the Lord would have it, when she had her cesarean, her friends had to go back to school, and she had no one to care for her because she didn't share that she was pregnant with her family. So what we wind up doing is, instead of staying in the room that the hospital had for us, the first night she and I stayed together in her room because she asked me to stay with her. And just knowing that I had a cesarean with my middle child, I knew it was going to be almost impossible for her to get around by herself even without a child. So in talking to her, we wind up staying at her apartment for the 10 days waiting period to adopt. And to me, that was such a gift within itself that we all stayed together at her place for 10 days. So there's no actual gift, but just a gift of time.
That's amazing. And I know you had actually, I would love, Toni, if you would go a little further with that, because you told me something around that part of your story before that I think was so meaningful, and you were actually there to help her, right? You decided she doesn't have anyone else. Can you talk also a little bit about why it was so private for her?
Well, and not judging, everyone has their own experience. So her family was very protective of her, and she was away at college. She was homeschooled all the way up until she graduated, I guess, high school, homeschool, however that happened. So this was her first experience out. She got pregnant, and she knew that it wouldn't end well. Her parents would pull her out of school and things like that, and she really wanted to live her life. And so just hearing her story, and she didn't know who the father was, so she had no help there either. And tell so many friends. So, just knowing she needed someone, I felt like in her being in her 20s and I'm in my 40s, we still became so close, sharing our experiences and, just talking through it and telling her, don't feel bad about the way this worked out, because for me, it was God's design. This was a perfect plan, and it was just so nice. I felt that it's nice for me, too, because I almost didn't want to leave her after our 10 days because I just wanted to make sure she was okay and everything. And then she was able to, travel back home. She was moving a little slow, but, she was still able to maintain, her situation, just to herself.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. Because I think that a lot of times it may be sort of assumed that she's got all these people, at least that know about her adoption plan or her pregnancy in general, but the fact that you could be there for her and have that kind of relationship really speaks to, I think, the individual quality that each adoption comes with. That she didn't have a mom there to help her through her first labor and delivery, that you were also not only there for her baby, but for her. I think that I know how much that spoke to her, and that kind of attitude always seems to go far with these women. So Laura, what about you? Did you have an opportunity to give Ava's birth mother a gift? Or I know some states don't legally allow that, so it can vary.
Right. Actually, funny thing, I'm sorry if you hear a baby crying in the background. My child is sick right now, so my husband has her. So I apologize. But actually, for the gifts, we did not have the opportunity to buy anything ahead of time. I just really couldn't find that perfect thing that I wanted to get her. And so actually when we got there and I met her for the very first time, met our birth mom for the first time, she handed me a gift to give to my daughter when she's old enough, which immediately I started crying because, I mean, that's how amazing is that she thought so much of us and thought so much of our daughter that she wanted her to know everything about her. And so, but our adoption story was a little bit different. We were actually in that state 4 weeks. complications in there. Our birth mom got sick in the middle of, before she had signed the papers or anything, so we stayed out there for quite a long time. And so during that time, we were able to explore the area that we were in and do a little sightseeing. And actually, I found the perfect gift for her of what I thought was. And I just got, it was a simple thing. It was just a necklace, and it said family on it, because I wanted her to know that she was part of our family and that she is part of our family for life. You know, she will always be my daughter's birth mom, and she will always be a part of us.
I've heard that before too. It sometimes surprises adoptive parents. For both Laura and Toni, who just shared how much these women were appreciative of them and actually glad for them. Sometimes that's one of the most surprising aspects, but that really can only come because of open adoption, is her ability to know who you are and to actually tell you how she's feeling about the adoption plan. So Kim, I know there was a question you wanted to, while we have Laura here in attention, that we wanted to backtrack a little bit. Someone had asked, when Laura, you were talking about what brought you to Lifetime. I'm scrolling through these photos here. Kim, which question was that?
Oh. Yes, someone wanted to know more about your experience, Laura, with when you had mentioned something had gone on in maybe your research or experiences with other organizations before you came into Lifetime.
So, okay, what exactly are you asking? Just like what experience we've had before?
Yes, you had mentioned you had like a couple letdowns or something before you came to Lifetime, and they wanted to know like what had happened.
Well, it was just mainly
tips from that, probably.
So mainly our state where we currently reside, they just were not very, I don't know how to explain it. They were not very open to adoption. They had, you could do a lot of foster care, but there were not a lot of agencies available for us. And so that was really more our letdown per se. There were just a lot of criteria that they wanted that we just didn't feel comfortable with. And I mean, I probably had 6 to 10 adoption agencies stacked up with applications trying to decide which one we felt comfortable with, and none of them, I mean, not a one of them we were comfortable with. But it was something about Lifetime that we were like, this is it. This is it. We knew. And I also had a friend of ours that I met before we actually applied with Lifetime, that she had told me all about Lifetime and how great she loved the agency and all. And I kind of shoved it in the back of my mind because it's funny, my husband was like, well, we're not adopting a baby from California. And I'm like, but that doesn't mean Lifetime doesn't just place babies in California. So it's funny to see that because I guess I don't know if I can say this, but we did adopt a baby from California. So I laugh about that because that's kind of where we were, is that he, you know, that was our drawback. Oh, it's in California. We can't go that far, you know. But we did.
Yeah, absolutely. You hopped on that plane and you went.
We did.
Someone else was asking if you can talk, and this is for each of you, can you talk a little more about the initial contact you had with the birth moms that were considering you for adoption? Maybe like before you're officially matched, any type of communication you had, what kind of things you talked about, and how did it progress from just talking to officially being a match? If either of you can shed a little light on that part of your experience.
Toni, you might have more experience than I do, because we only spoke with our birth mom one night, and the next day we got an email from Lifetime saying she wants to match. So we didn't really have a lot of time with her, but Toni, you probably had more experience.
You know, I don't know if we matched after the first conversation. Both times I think we did, but it was really funny. With Aiden's mom, I was a little gun shy, so I told my husband, I said, yeah, you start talking, because if you mess this up, it's on you. And so because we knew that we had a name, Aiden, in mind that we wanted, And I remember hearing on some of the other webinars that it could be the smallest thing that a birth mom says, that's it. It could be that you have an animal, or you look like someone in their family. And sure enough, she asked us one of the first questions. She said, well, do you all have a name in mind? And I was like, oh, my goodness, here we go. This is it. We're not going to match. And my husband said, Aiden. And she said, oh, my God. She said, how are you spelling that? I said, oh, my goodness. He said the wrong thing. And when he said A-I-D-E-N, she said, if I had a chance, that's just what I wanted to name him and spell it the same way. We all knew right then and there. It was just a match. We all agreed, and we were all happy. It was like just God saying, this is it. Go ahead and relax.
That's pretty amazing. I love how you felt so nerve-wracked about the question, how do I respond? And before you could, your husband already blurted it out.
Yeah, he did.
That's called teamwork.
That's funny. Well, and you're speaking to so many different things there. I wrote down 3 different topics: choosing baby's name, having those initial conversations, and what stands out to a birth mother to get you picked by her. Laura, do you remember what stood out to Ava's birth mom, why your profile was the one she had to talk to?
I did. I remember asking her, and let me tell you, that phone call with your birth mom for the first time, everybody's nervous. It's not just you and your husband. It's everybody. So know that going in. And so just be yourself. Be open and relaxed and ask her questions. And we asked her, why did you choose us? Why were you thinking of us? And she said, because you had a huge family that was right there. And we do. I mean, all 3, we have 2 sets of grandparents that are here. And we have siblings and great-grandparents that are here in our town. So that was something that stood out to her. She wanted her child to have family. So.
There was a question I wanted to go back to Toni. We had a great little candid comment that said, did I just hear that she was an older adopted mom? That's what I fear about the most. Does she have any advice for quote-unquote older parents wanting to adopt? And I just want to add to that Toni probably, based on our averages, doesn't really fall into the older category, but you may have even felt like that having older kids already.
I did, and I was thinking to myself, I said, these girls are going to look and they're going to want, parents that they feel can play with their kids, run around. And one thing that I can say is I asked my birth mother as well, I said, why did you pick us? And she said, well, because in your profile, the things that were important to you were important to me for my son. Like we were both educators, and more than anything, education is key for me. Church life, spirituality, things like that. She said that's what was important to me. And so as an older parent, I'm going to tell you, I was nervous, but then I started to think, you know what, if it's for us again, God will bless us. I mean, and to me, I would have never thought to have another one. So if God put it in our heart, he had to make a way for us. That's how I felt.
Absolutely. And you're right, Libby. Being in your 40s is not old when it comes to adoption. Most adoptive parents are in their 30s and 40s. You'd be considered pretty young if you're in your 20s. So hopefully that helps a lot of our listeners tonight feel a little better about themselves if they're worried. Here's another question that came in, and I would love to hear both of your take on this. Did you do any research on a pediatrician, like a doctor beforehand for this baby, and how did the early doctor visits work? I can imagine maybe were there some special things that, went on in the early doctor's visits that maybe wouldn't have been natural conversations with a biological child type of thing. What was your experience with getting a pediatrician and the early visits?
For us, our pediatrician here was actually my pediatrician as a child, but he is a very dear family friend of ours. So we knew immediately who we were going to choose here once we got back home. Now out there, because we were out there for 4 weeks, she did several checkups out there, and I mean, we were comfortable with it. I mean, as comfortable as you can be going to strange places with your newborn baby. But yeah, I think I mean, we didn't do a whole lot of research because I just knew. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, I think it does, and that might be something that hasn't occurred to people. Hey, we might have a family doctor who I can just call on, that I may not have to do a bunch of research, you know.
Right.
And did they ask any questions related to the adoption when you were at those early checkups?
Just mainly if we had any medical history, and we did. We actually had our birth mom's medical records, so we were able to give our daughter as much as we knew. And there were a lot of things that we didn't know that I could email her and say, hey, is this something, you know, like for us, our daughter had issues with milk early on. Formula was horrible with us. She screamed for the first 4 weeks of life, I think. And but once we got that settled, she was good. But I did find out later that our birth dad had a milk allergy, and I'm like, well, that would have been nice to know so during those 4 weeks. But no, I mean, I just love that we have the capability of having those medical records, and me emailing her and saying, hey, was this an issue? And she's able to respond.
Definitely. Good insight there as to why an open adoption connection helps, even with just the little things that could really make life a lot easier.
Right.
Toni, how did it go for you with getting it?
I want to piggyback on that question to Kim, because we had another great question about insurance. A lot of parents wonder, when do I add my baby to my insurance? And maybe, Toni, you could kind of add that to your answer also.
Okay, so for a pediatrician, of course, since we had 2 children already, it was a no-brainer. It was going to be the same doctor because we absolutely love her. She prays with us after every visit. Now, the interesting thing is there were no uncomfortable questions because we do technology so well, the birth mother and I. When we had to go to the doctor's for his first visit, within the first 10 days, we all went together. So she was with us. When we came back home and had to start going to visits, his first year, I would always let her know about the appointment, and we would FaceTime while we're there so that she could be a part of the visit, because usually my husband was at work. We didn't want to both take off a visit. So I would just take off, and then it was like the birth mom and I were going to the visits together. And she could answer the questions, things like that, because she has asthma, and I just wanted to know, would he have asthma, you know, things to ask the doctor about. So it was like never uncomfortable. But I will tell you about the insurance. If you have insurance through your job, while you're at the hospital, you can give them your insurance information, because that's what I did. I just went downstairs, gave them my insurance information. The day the baby is born, the baby, at least for our state, is automatically placed on your insurance to start. Then when you go back to your job, I think you have about maybe 30 days to provide some documentation that either you're in the works of adoption or something like that. So it was smooth.
What about, I love this, we actually have a couple of people I recognize on here who recently adopted, and they're in the process of finalizing their adoptions, and I'm so glad to see them on the webinar tonight, because this also applies for not just for people that are preparing, but also people who are, you know, taking the after steps. But how would you answer this question? She wants to know, how did the whole Social Security card and final birth certificate thing work out?
It was real easy for us. The lawyer sent us the birth certificate in the mail. We first got a birth certificate with the birth mother's name on it, but by the time the adoption was final, they sent us the birth certificate, our name. The lawyer told us to wait until after we got the birth certificate in order to go, and adoption was final, to do the Social Security, because if not, you'd have to wait and change, the name to your last name and things like that. So that's what we did. As soon as we got the birth certificate, we went to the Social Security office and got a Social Security card.
That's so good to know. And I know that some of these answers, especially when it comes to insurance and what it covers, or when it covers, or when you get the next birth certificate, a lot of it depends on where you live, how fast things are processed where you live, and if all the ducks are in a row to get to that point too. So, I think it's good to talk about these because a lot of people don't always think about these topics, but also just remember that these answers are also why you want to make sure you're working with qualified adoption attorneys to help you with all of these details, so that you're not having to backtrack or start over, or heaven forbid ever ask a birth mother to start the process again because things were messed up. But I love that, Toni, you just said, well, it wasn't that difficult, because it really is just part of the steps. You just keep moving things forward. Laura, what was it like for you guys?
For us, it was a little tricky. Our daughter was able to stay on, because we were in the state of California, she was able to stay on Medi-Cal until the end of the year. And then she was actually placed on, because we had some issues with my husband's insurance and all, ours was a little more difficult. So we are actually still currently paying out of pocket for her own health insurance. But that should be taken care of soon. So that was a little bit of a nightmare and a little for us, at first. But we're able to budget that out each month, and it has worked out.
Yeah. And sometimes there are those surprises, but again, adoption always calls for flexibility. If there's any theme that I hear running through every story, it's flexibility and being willing to carry the next step. So as we wrap up tonight, we had a lot of great questions, and gosh, I'm tempted to make whole webinars based off of some of these coming in, but I also don't want to keep these moms away from their babies at bedtime too much longer. So I would love if each of you could speak, maybe what's on your mind tonight that you have learned and you want to make sure other people know, or a final thought, or maybe a question that came up recently that you thought, oh man, I wish I had asked that a long time ago. Start with you. What would you want to say to the people listening tonight as we wrap up?
Okay, so one thing that I would say is, I don't know if you all realize how valuable the information you give us is. So you gave me a list of attorneys in my state. That was so helpful because I was able to call them, and if they felt as though, and I got a lot of different lawyers that said different things, but one lawyer actually referred me to a lawyer who could better service us based on our situation. When it came time for my home study, you all shared with me a list for my area, but then even after I got it, what I would recommend to everyone else is, if you appreciate what you've been given, turn around and give back, because I think I shared with you all how I felt about the lawyers I spoke to, who was the most helpful, who, I would recommend, and then even on some of my own research, I shared with you the other information. To me, just the exchange of information meant the world to me, and stay connected with Lifetime from beginning all the way to the end. I can't speak for you all at Lifetime, but I don't think we get on your nerves like we think we do. I felt as though,
You're right.
And I think I got on my husband's nerves a little, because, I said, well, it's taking too long, and by the way, ours only took about 9 months beginning to end, because we signed in September and our son was born, I think, in July, so maybe a little longer. But, it was like, wow. And my husband said, Toni, you're getting on their nerves. Would you stop? So that's what I would say.
We had a similar issue, Toni. The weekend before we found out about our daughter, actually, I had a huge meltdown, just cried and cried that I didn't want to spend another holiday season. This is November, another holiday without a baby. Like, it was just terrible. And, and then we got, well, I guess that was early November. Yeah, and then we get a call from Lifetime the following Monday, and our whole world is rocked, from that. And my husband just reassured me. He's like, see, I told you. Told you, wait on God's timing. Wait on God's timing. So.
That's wonderful. Thank you both so much for being here tonight. Kim, is there anything you wanted to add before we wrap up?
No, I think that, well, just a few basic details as always. If you're new to Lifetime, definitely fill out the application online so we can know you're out there and begin to help you and answer questions and maybe even learn more about you and see if we could have a good partnership toward a successful adoption for you. The application is online at lifetimeadoption.com. Lifetime does not charge an application fee. And if you have questions that you would like to discuss or have answered prior to filling out the application or once you submit it or at any point, call us or email us. The phone number is 1-800-923-6784, or you can email adopt@lifetimeadoption.com. And Toni and Laura, thank you so much for sharing these details and being so easygoing as we just kind of tossed questions your way. You guys did great tonight.
Thanks for asking us.
Mm-hmm. I'm from the feedback that we're getting right now, I'm thinking that we're probably going to have to plan more webinars like this. So if you have any feedback or requests or ideas or questions after tonight's webinar, just remember you can reach out to your coordinator. It always helps to let her know what you learned from webinars, or if you have feedback or a comment, because we can work on creating more webinars to help you with topics on your mind in the future. And if you don't yet have a coordinator, like Kim said, you can just write to us at adopt@lifetimeadoption.com and let us know how tonight's webinar helped. So thank you again, Laura and Toni, and to everyone who attended tonight, thank you for taking the time with us and submitting your questions, and we will look forward to meeting with all of you again soon. So keep watching your email or look at adoptionteleconference.com for the next webinar. Have a great night, everyone.
Okay, thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Good night. Bye.